The Grady Fantasy Podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Let's go places. What's up, everybody? This is David Grady, and welcome to Grady Fantasy Podcast Week 2. Week 1 actually was a hit. 20 people visited the video or the podcast on YouTube. I'll go ahead and thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That was a clap to all of you. Even though you probably just clicked on it, listened to it for 5 minutes, noticed I was rambling a lot, and just cut it off. But you know what? That counts. That's a view. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. But this week, I'm just going to be a little bit shorter and get to the point. And we'll get started by saying regular season is upon us. And if you're like me, you've already got your drafting out the way. Your leagues are set. Your team is set, and you're ready to go. But every week, you normally look for gems on the waiver wire. You look for people who have some fantasy relevance and haven't been picked up by people, and you do your best to try to get them through a waiver wire pickup every week. And I have one person that could, not saying he will, but could have fantasy relevance this year, and he's pretty much on every waiver wire in every fantasy league ever. And his name is Virgil Green. He's the tight end for the Denver Broncos. And you might look at me and say, Virgil Green, the perennial blocking tight end for Denver Broncos? And I would say, yeah. And you say, the perennial tight end who has no fantasy relevance whatsoever? Yes, him, Virgil Green. Because he earned the starting job this year in Denver. It wasn't just given to him, he earned it. And I'll get started with the stats and a couple of reasons why I think he could have some relevance this year. Reason number one, his stats during the preseason. Now, I know it is the preseason, that's a disclaimer, and he's playing against practice squads and B teams or whatever. But this is a rule of thumb I go with when it comes to fantasy and when it comes to preseason. I think the starting team on every NFL team, the starting squad, gets about one whole game worth of experience split up over 4 preseason games. I'll say it again. My rule of thumb for stats is that the first squad for every NFL team gets about 1 game total of playing time split up over 4 weeks. Some more, some less, That's just how it normally works. So that's my rule of thumb. And with that rule of thumb in mind, let's go over Virgil Green's stats for the preseason this year. 10 targets, 10 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. That's not bad at all. That would actually be very good stats for a game. Now let's multiply that by 16 just to mess around with the numbers and skew the numbers a little bit. 160 catches, if he stays healthy, 160 catches, 1,600 yards, roughly, and 16 touchdowns. That's not going to happen. We know it. But sometimes I just like to multiply it just to see what he may do or what he probably won't do, just to do it in my mind because I like math. But anyway, that's not going to happen. He's not going to be that. He's not going to be 2013 Jimmy Graham. Nothing like that is actually going to happen. But he could have some relevance, not only because of what he did in the preseason, but also because of the type of scheme that his coach runs. Now, his coach is Gary Kubiak, and Kubiak runs a run-heavy system, a very run-heavy system. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, he was the offensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos in 97 and 98 when Terrell Davis was there. And it was a very run-heavy offense at that time, too. Run-heavy with John Elway and Terrell Davis. He ran a lot. I think Terrell Davis got 1,700 yards and 2,000 yards back-to-back, respectively, in those seasons. But that was a Kubiak offense. And he became a head coach in 2006. And he was with the Houston Texans, Baltimore Ravens, and Denver Broncos last year, and they won a Super Bowl together. But he's in that type of offense. They feature the running back quite a bit, but they also feature the tight end a lot as well. And I guess the example that I can give you, the best example for a Kubiak offense, is Owen Daniels. And Owen Daniels has been a Kubiak tight end all of his career. As a matter of fact, when Kubiak was in Houston, he drafted Daniels in 2006. Daniels came in. He was his tight end in that offense. When Kubiak left and went to Baltimore, guess who followed him? Owen Daniels. And in 2015, when he went to Denver to be the head coach, guess who followed him again? Owen Daniels. And they won a Super Bowl together last year. So Daniels is probably the best example of what a tight end can do in a Kubiak system. And I'll go ahead and give you some stats, and I'll give you some lows and some highs, about 4 or 5 years in like the best year that Owen Daniels actually had. That way you can have a floor and a ceiling of what Virgil Green potentially could do. Let me see. We'll start in 2015. He started 16 games, He had 46 receptions for 517 yards and 3 TDs. In 14, 48 receptions, 527 yards, 4 TDs in 13 games. In 13, 5 games, 24 receptions, 250 yards, and 3 TDs. Now, that was only 5 games, and he was hurt the rest of that year. Let's give you the high. Let me see which one is the high. His best year was in 2012. He had 62 receptions, 716 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That was Owen Daniels' best year, was 2012. So to me, you have a good floor and ceiling. And I honestly believe that if Virgil Green does what he's supposed to do on the field, he can have somewhere in between that. He won't have the high stats that I multiplied earlier, but he could possibly have about 50 to 60 receptions, 600 yards, and 5 or 6 touchdowns. That's very possible. Now, in a PPR league, I think he would fare better because you get points per reception. And in a PPR league, that will equal about, 60 catches, 60 points plus 600 yards. That's another 60 points, 1 point every 10 yards. That's 120. And then 5 touchdowns. Let's just say 5. That's 30. So about 150 points, which is actually pretty good when it comes to fantasy relevance. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be, Gronk or anything like that, but that's pretty serviceable for a tight end. If you think about that, 150 points over 16 games in a PPR league, that's about 10 points per game. That's not bad. It's not the best, but it's not bad. That means that he could have some fantasy relevance this year. Another reason why I think that he could have some fantasy relevance is because Siemian is going to be their quarterback. According to the depth chart that I looked at, he's their starting quarterback this year. And I think Siemian, well, of course he's a rookie, so I think there's going to be some inexperience there. And when there's inexperience, there's going to be some checkdowns. He's going to have a safety valve. And when I say checkdowns, I mean those are progressions that quarterbacks have to make. So say there's a passing play, and his first instinct is to go with Demaryius Thomas. Well, he can't get to him. Then he'll go with Emmanuel Sanders, but he can't get to him either. Eventually, he's going to make progressions and check down to the tight end. In some cases, tight end or running back, either one. But he'll check down to the player that's closest to him, whether it's 8 or 10 yards out. And that could easily be the tight end. It could be Virgil Green. So Virgil Green could get a lot of receptions that way, being the safety valve for Siemian, especially in 3rd and long situations when he's trying to move the chains. And if Virgil Green is within 8 to 10 yards, all he has to do technically is throw it up to try to get it to him as best he can, really. So the check down method could work in Virgil Green's favor. As far as TD chances to get a touchdown, I don't know. I'm unsure about that right now. He is a big target. It could lead to some chances for touchdown, but I'm not sure about that. I think maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns might be his ceiling this year. And I might be conservative with that, but I think it will be his ceiling more so than the potential of maybe getting double-digit TDs this year. But anything's possible. So those are the reasons why that I think that Virgil Green could have fantasy relevance this year. Another interesting fact you need to keep in mind too, according to ESPN Fantasy, now that's the only website I checked, Virgil Green is only owned in 10% of all leagues. So odds are he's on your waiver wire. So keep an eye on him. And if he starts to do pretty good things, you might want to pick him up early. The second player I wanted to talk about is Deshaun Jackson. He's a wide receiver for the Washington Redskins, a wide receiver that I avoid at all costs in fantasy. Why? Because he's burned me so many times. He'll put up 0 points, put up a big donut whenever I start him. But then when I get mad and bench him the next week, he'll put up 20. I mean, he's just very mercurial. He's feast or famine. You'll get 0 or 30 from him. That's just how it is. And I just don't trust him, so I avoid him at all costs. And he's had some injury issues as well. And he doesn't stay healthy that much, or as much as you would hope he would. But anyway, when people think of Washington's offense, the X factor is Jordan Reed. And that's what people think of if they pay attention to football. And that's not wrong. They're correct when they think that. But let me give you a fact about Deshaun Jackson and Kirk Cousins. According to Dan Graziano, he wrote this. He said that when Deshaun Jackson is healthy and on the field, Kirk Cousins' passer rating is 126.1. I'll say it again. When Deshaun Jackson is healthy and on the field, Kirk Cousins' passer rating, QB rating, or efficiency rating is 126.1. To give you an idea of his efficiency, QB efficiency rating goes from 0 to 158.3. I do believe that's the perfect rating. And for him to sport 126.1 is actually pretty good. It's very good, as a matter of fact, when he's on the field. So that means if Deshaun Jackson played for 12 to 14 games in a season, which he probably won't, that could bode well for the offense on the Redskins side of the ball. That could really bode well for the players that we chose on fantasy draft day if Deshaun Jackson is on the field. But I thought that was a really good tidbit of information to take into consideration. If Deshaun Jackson is playing, it might be a good idea to start whoever you have on Washington's receiver core, just because he opens the field up that much for Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins becomes that much more efficient when he's on the field. That's all I have for today. My name is David Grady. You've been listening to the Grady Fantasy Podcast, and you guys take care. Hopefully you have a good week 1. See ya.